What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk about Dragon Age yet again. I want to talk about the franchise. I want to talk about Veilguard. And I want to hit a couple different topics, in this video. Some of it might get heated, and hey, I'm here to respect your opinion as long as you respect my opinion, okay? But main two things, I want to talk about what went wrong, why did the Veilguard fail, and then where do we go from here, okay? So I think in order to talk about where we go from here, we have to talk about, what kind of caused this in the first place. Now, look, I did a video on my second channel, Podcast Now Plus. I went over the initial news, right? The whole it failed to meet expectations by 50%. Nice way of saying that it flopped. And look, I'm not here to... There's people that if a game sells 10,000 under what it's supposed to do, every game is like a massive failure. I'm not really here to do that, but when a game is a failure, I'm going to call it a failure, okay? Just to kind of be fair to all sides. So Dragon Age the Veilguard did fail. They wanted this thing to reach probably 2.5, 3.5 million. It reached 1.5. You look at the sales of like Inquisition. Inquisition sold pretty well like at launch, and also just did good over time. I do not think you're going to get that with the Veilguard. I think that game is done for. I just don't see the long-term sales of it, okay? So again, that's kind of where we're at. We're going to talk right now about like what happened and then, where we're going from here. Well, this is where I think things start to break down, okay? Because you have the internet, you have people that are very, entrenched in a side and entrenched in their opinions, and hey, everybody, again, is entitled to their own opinion. You can say whatever you want. I think it's more than one thing. I think that's the easy answer, or the thing that I would want to say more than anything. Obviously, one part of the fandom or one part of just the internet is going to blame, the woke versus anti-woke stuff. Now, here's actually a case for all those people that talk about fence sitting and all that kind of stuff. I will actually say, well, two things. The writing of this game was not good. And I think that's actually the bigger issue. So I'm gonna come back to that, okay? But if you want to talk about like where they inserted stuff that just didn't really belong, I will agree that Tosh as a character was terrible. That character had no point to be there besides whoever wrote that character just wanted to say whatever they wanted to say. And hey, I mean, you have journals for that, you have diaries for that. You could say it to your neighbor, but to put it in a game, and it frustrated me. When it came to that character, every single quest, besides maybe two, just involved the sexuality, just involved who they were as a person. Let's go talk to their mom. Let's go explore why non-binary is even a thing in this universe, even though in past games they've actually had language for that stuff. And I would say this, okay, back to what I just said maybe 30 seconds ago, that is actually my main flaw with Tosh as a character, was you are just making this character just a mouthpiece for that. It doesn't have to be good or bad. You can agree with it, disagree with it, whatever, but there's actually nothing there to the character. And I will say, okay, and that's kind of it. There's nothing there to the character. All right, take a few steps back now. It's the writing. In my opinion, writing was a very, very big part. And again, it's not just one thing. I think you could say woke versus anti-woke, whatever you want to say. The writing, I think, of this game was just very weak. There was very few characters that actually stood out, if any. I mean, my two favorite characters were Varric and Solus. And, I'll just say this. Like, if you know, with one of them, and the other one just wasn't utilized all that much. So, like, wink, wink, nod, nod. If you played the game or if you know the story, you might know what I'm talking about. It just, those were my two favorite characters, and they were not done, thoroughly. They weren't even in the game all that much. Everybody else was just very forgettable. There just wasn't. The last 3 hours of the game was actually quite good. It was actually really good. And I thought when I was playing it, oh, this is what people were talking about with the Mass Effect 2 moment. They weren't talking about the whole game, or they better not have been talking about the whole game. They were talking about the ending, because the ending does give off those vibes, and the ending I do think actually is pretty well put together. The issue is you go through 35 hours before that, and that's not the same quality, okay? So it's not, and I said this before, I said this actually on the Podcast Now Plus video, I don't hate this game. I don't like parts to it. I think it's not a good game, but I kind of just spoiled it right there. I don't hate it. I don't like it. I think I talked about it being like the most game that I've played in a long time. The most 5 out of 10 average. And what that means to you could be different than what it means to me, right? It's a 5 out of 10 game. There's some things that are enjoyable. There's some things that you can kind of just turn your brain off. Like the combat at times can be, rewarding, or it can also just be a thing. Hey, listen to a podcast, listen to some music. I love Smashing Pumpkins. I listen to them on the side, and you play the game, and it doesn't really matter what's going on in the game. I'm focused on on other things. That's kind of the game that this is. And again, so like what went wrong? A lot of things. Nothing really, I think, grabs you about this game. Nothing really stands out. They didn't go all the way with kind of anything, right? There's no standout characters. There's no standout gameplay. There's no standout moments except for maybe the ending, but you have to go through, and you have to remember, most people do not finish single-player games, right? I've talked about this for like 3-4 years on this channel. It's like 20-30%, depending on like what game you're talking about. It's low. You can look it up. It's very, very low. The amount of people that got to that Mass Effect coming-of-age, ending, they had to play through the rest of it. Very few people did that, okay? In the grand scheme of things. In the grand scheme of those 1.5 million players, very few of them would have made it to the end, okay? So those are just things that I think of. The writing, the characters, the story, the gameplay. It just, I don't know. I'm not even, and by the way, and there's plenty of evidence, I like how I do things because you can check me and you can say, shoot, I can't really, tell him he's this or he's that. I'm not even like a Dragon Age 1 elitist, okay? I do think it's the best game that they, in the Dragon Age franchise, but it's not like they haven't done good besides then. I actually do like Inquisition, and I actually really like 2. It doesn't come close to 1, but I would really like it. Like, I would say that, and I actually did a whole video on that on my 3rd channel where I talked about Dragon Age 2. So it's not even like I'm over here saying, okay, if you're not Dragon Age 1, screw off, I hate it, like, you can't even try it. I'm not one of those people, you can try it. Now, I actually want to throw in one other thing, because again, I do think it's multifaceted. I think people that would say, oh, it's just the woke stuff, I feel like that's not really analyzing the situation all that well. I mean, call it what it is, call me whatever you want, but from my perspective, just labeling it one thing and just saying, oh, it's because of the wokeness that the game didn't sell, I feel like that's not true. I really do. Like, yes, Tosh is not a good character, but again, like, I think there's complexity there. I think there's like more than one reason, and I also just think as a whole, it's not that good of a game. But let me throw in one other thing. I also think it was how they made this game, right? You could say, all right, well, it sells 1.5 million. I mean, like 15 years ago, that might have been enough to get you by, right? But nowadays, they spent years and years and years working on this game, so that's kind of like an industry problem, including a BioWare problem. But also, what about that era where it was the multiplayer game? Remember when they were going multiplayer and then they stripped it of that? And, I will say this. I don't see too many, like, remnants of that in the game. There could be a little, like, here and there, but that doesn't mean it didn't impact it. You know what I mean? Like, that absolutely could have done something, because you might have wasted years, and that's money, and that's expectation. So if you wanted the game to sell 3, 4, 5 million, right? Well, if you didn't waste however long you did and the money you put into it, right? Trying to make it something that it could never have been, right? If this game came out as like a live service multiplayer game, it would have done even worse. Far, far worse, right? So you wasted that time, you wasted those resources. Did that affect, did it affect a lot of different things? Yeah, it actually could have affected things that we don't even know about, but also did it affect like how they wanted the game to do, right? 1.5 million, if the game was 2 years in development less, could that have been better for them? It could, you know what I mean? So, I mean, that's kind of the picture I'm trying to paint. Bottom line is, a lot went wrong. A lot, and none of it's really excusable, you know what I mean? You gotta write better than that. You gotta make a more engaging game. And I've said this before, but I do want to kind of, if I'm poking the hornet's nest, I might as well go all the way. The people that were calling this game that returned to form for BioWare, I don't know, it was already a bad take like a week after the game came out. I feel like it's worse and worse. I just, again, I don't hate the game. I really don't. Like, it's not in my top 20. I think I did a top 25 list of 2024 games. It's not in my top 25. It's not dead last, and I actually wouldn't put it in my bottom 10, because I feel like games that are in my bottom 10 really deserve to be in my bottom 10. But, it's just nothing special. And that's almost the problem, right? It's It's whatever. And this is a part of a very popular and a franchise that means something to people. You know what I mean? That's almost the more insulting part, is if you do this with some like throwaway title and a throwaway franchise, you're not, you know what I mean? It doesn't really impact, but like we're talking about Dragon Age. Okay, so let's just finish this video off. So where do we go from here, right? I really think the franchise is done for now. I don't want to go doomsday and like go all the way there, but I don't think Dragon Age is done forever. I feel like movies, television, games, etc. When you have a name of a property that's so big enough, you never really let it go, okay? It can be dormant for 5, 10, 15 years, but it'll always somewhat still be around. Even, hey, my biasness of like Sly Cooper, right? That game is still somewhat around. PlayStation just brought it back to the native, playing on PS4 and PS5, right? The game's still kind of around. Now, does that mean you get new games in that franchise? No. But, like, it's the spirit of it, kind of lingers. It's still kind of haunting us. The good games don't necessarily haunt us. They haunt us positively. But, that's kind of how I feel, for Dragon Age. Like, this is not a franchise I think you go back to for a while. Oh, by the way, one thing I think did not hurt this game is I saw this, I think, Gene Park, and I don't dislike the guy. I kind of have, like, an indifferent opinion. I think he was trying to blame, like, because it's a sequel to a, sequel franchise 10 years after Inquisition, that is what killed it. I don't think that's true whatsoever. I think, like, maybe there's a part to it where people say, oh, well, do I want, like, the conclusion of a story that was 10 years ago? But, like, Inquisition, especially if you didn't do the DLC, like, Inquisition had endings, and I also just don't think you really needed to have played. Like, a casual audience, this could have been your first one. I really hope it wasn't, because this is not a good showing of what Dragon Age is as a franchise. But I don't know. I just kind of wanted to throw that in, maybe also continue to poke the hornet's nest. Again, I have nothing against the guy, but I think that is probably the dead last reason I would ever come up with, oh, it's a sequel. It's a sequel to a franchise. I feel like it's everything else. And then we can talk about it being a sequel 10 years later. And that's just me. Maybe that impacted somebody. Maybe 2 people out there said, oh, I don't want to have to replay these games or play them for the first time to understand this one. You didn't even really need to do that. So it's like, I don't know. I really don't like that reasoning. I don't think that's accurate. But again, where does it go from here? I think it's iced. I think you put it aside, and I think you don't touch it for a very long time. Obviously, Mass Effect is next up, and I'm getting very worried. Maybe we can talk about that in just another video altogether, but I'm getting very concerned because it's just, what have they shown me that's supposed to make me very excited and optimistic for their next game? You've got to nail it with Mass Effect, and if you don't, we might not even be talking about future BioWare games after that. They could just be done. Or if Mass Effect actually succeeds, which, again, I'm not doomsday. Like, I want it to succeed. If Mass Effect works, I honestly still don't think they go back. I feel like you would just do the next Mass Effect, right? Because maybe you could start like a new trilogy. I think you're done with Dragon Age for 6, 7, 8 years at the earliest. So, if you thought Inquisition to now was a long time, we honestly could be repeating it simply out of, yes, it does take 5, 6 years to make games nowadays, but also just because I think they're done. You know what I mean? So, those are all just my opinions. Again, like, hey, if you have a different thought process, bring it on. Write in the comments. I have nothing against it. You respect my thoughts. I'll respect your thoughts, okay? Let me know what you think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.